Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Earth Justice is a national legal nonprofit defending the environment and people's health. Until justice stands for all, our lawyers will never rest. More at earthjustice.org/neverrest. Earth Justice, because the earth needs a good lawyer.
Audience, wherever you may hail, I'm your host John Bruni and welcome to The Focus. Join us as we explore some of Australia's and the world's most fascinating and important contemporary developments, shedding a spot of light in a world filled with alternative fact darkness. In this episode, our guest is Leonard David, who'll speak to us about whether the United States and the People's Republic of China should cooperate in space while they are earthly strategic competitors. We spoke to Leonard when we were on Radio Adelaide about unidentified aerial phenomenon, and we are happy to welcome him back this time to our podcast. Leonard is a space journalist reporting on space activities for over 50 years. He's also an author. His latest book, Moon Rush, The New Space Race, was published by National Geographic in May 2019. Leonard, welcome back to The Focus.
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Leonard, is it unreasonable for the Americans to bar space cooperation with the Chinese, considering how much US space tech and techniques CCP operatives had stolen through espionage?
Well, that's a great leading question. There's people paranoid about all that, and that's fine. In some ways, it's beyond just subscribing to Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine and looking at stories about how the Apollo capsule came together. You're still left with engineering, you're still left with physics, you're still left with a lot of chemistry, and China, is really on the ramp up. I mean, they got talented people. The espionage thing is a little worrisome for some. I grew up in Washington, D.C., covering NASA for about 30 years. And I got there about the time that Proxmire, a senator, was so upset about the Apollo-Soyuz docking. It was a big deal that they're going to steal our docking technology, and we got to worry about that. Well, okay, it turned out to be fairly, after a while, that became, everybody's got docking technology. In fact, we better, in my mind, start looking at everybody's docking technology, because I think as more people go up and potentially be stranded, we better have capability for space rescue, which is under the United Nations, Outer Space Affairs group, and try to come up with a meaningful dialogue about how do we rescue other astronauts. I don't care what country it is. How do we get them back down? So, the espionage thing is still out there. It's a worrisome issue. ITAR, you've got technology that is, but I pretty much scan through China technology almost every morning, and man, they're moving out. In many cases, we're going to have to be asking them, can we borrow some of that technology?
Leonard, can you explain to our audience whether this barring of Sino-American space cooperation is just a political thing, or is it actually backed up by specific legislation?
Well, there's a amendment that was put in NASA. It precludes NASA from having researchers spend NASA money on working with China. It's the Wolf Amendment, and he was a very dedicated guy. He attached all this space stuff to human rights in China, which has its own baggage, for China. And so that Wolf Amendment excluded a lot of people from using NASA money to get involved with China, and it's an impediment. However, this article I wrote for Scientific American, I asked people about that, and there are things. I'm not saying to get around it. I'm just saying there are ways to work with it where you're not violating any kind of rules. And I talked to the NASA administrator. Bill Nelson is a new guy. He's a new NASA chief. And I talked to him direct about this Wolf Amendment. And, for him, it's the law. I mean, he's a senator, former senator. He's got to abide by the law. But he did say that, my questions for him was that he felt we're back where we were with the former Soviet Union. We got to find ways to work this out. And I think he was pretty amenable to looking at some other mechanisms that we might be able to work with China directly. And, there's too many things that China has got on the board that American scientists would appreciate and be involved in, and vice versa. China would appreciate American scientific involvement in deciphering lunar samples from Mars, and they're going to do it with us or without us. It doesn't matter. I mean, Europe is working with China already. That's another aspect of this. So I think the whole point of the article was like, throw it out there and let's see if we can get people to salute something. I mean, is there a mechanism here? Is there something coming? Or are we really worried about human rights, and we're worried about what you mentioned, piracy of technology? I mean, how bad is it? Let's look at it. Too much on the table. Too much on the table.
Leonard, you mentioned the Soyuz-Apollo space docking in the early 1970s, but space cooperation with the Soviet Union during the heyday of the Cold War was no sure thing. I mean, there was the mutual suspicion and intense competition between the US and USSR, which really colored relations between these two countries. So really, can an argument be made that a similar situation exists today between the US and the PRC?
I don't know. It seems to me it's almost a kind of a mirror image there.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on a deep end here because I'm just, we got enough problems about human rights in America. Black Lives Matter and a lot of other issues that we've got. We got our own issues here on human rights. So that's just one that's on the target board. But I'd say that in my mind, the idea that right now, as we speak, we've got 3 Chinese astronauts in their early module space station. We got a resupply launch coming up shortly and they're going to come back down mid-September or something like that. And we have another crew go up. I mean, they're going to have a really fast-paced space station. I mean, it's almost like a Betty Crocker cookbook thing compared to what we did on our International Space Station. Yes, it's much smaller and all this, but man, they're blending stuff, and there's all of a sudden, voila, they got a space station. And they're going to use that as a diplomatic tool to involve other countries like we have. We got, 13 or 14 countries involved in our International Space Station? That's what they're going to do. And so and then we have the issue of our own space station. How long is that going to last? They've already put in their, PR campaign that they're going to be up and operating while ours is going to be down. We won't have anybody in there in our International Space Station if the timing is accurate. But this is really exciting times. I tell my wife a lot, I wish I was like 13 again. I mean, this is like when I came into this stuff, there was so much happening, and there is so much happening now. The commercial, SpaceX, all these Bezos, Richard Branson, You have a tremendous private sector activity going on. Plus, you wrap up China, India coming on board with human spaceflight soon. It's going to be a different 21st century as we close this baby out.
Chinese space ambitions are forcing the United States to reevaluate their own position or its own position in low Earth orbit, the translunar and lunar environments and beyond. Has this brought NASA and the US military space agencies out of their long period of relative lethargy, especially with regard to manned spaceflight programs?
That's a good one, and it's one that I'm personally concerned with. I just wrote some new things about cislunar space activities that the military is very interested in, not only the U.S. but other countries. I mean, we're seeing, in my mind, here we go. I'm a peacenik kid, 60s, air, land, sea, polar, confrontation. Okay, let's throw in space on top of that. And there's where we are. We're seeing this gradation of conflict moving into the space environment. And again, I'm not saying the US, China goads us, we goad them. Russia is certainly a player. And so we're just seeing another, kind of battleground competition, laser blinding, GPS fouling, go on and on. I mean, we're all, a lot of this stuff's classified, so God knows what we're doing to them and what they're doing to us. I know what's going on. I don't have any doubt. And they're testing us. They're testing our capability, and we're certainly, I'm sure, doing things the same thing. We all have war games now that include space and anti-satellite taking out somebody's capability. So it's sad to be as old as I am and going to cash out not too far away. And wasn't this where I came in? Wasn't this where we all came in, in our age group, of all these planet paranoid things? We're just on the edge of getting into space in a bigger wavefront of hostility and confrontation. And, I'm really disappointed in that. It's just, I just see it happening and you just write about it and go, well, there you go, underscore that.
I'm John Bruni, and you're listening to Sage International's The Focus podcast, and we're speaking with Leonard David on whether the US and China can cooperate in space. Considering the hostility and total lack of trust between Beijing and Washington on so many matters, how would you see confidence-building measures being created, at the very least, to allow for pragmatic Sino-American cooperation in space?
Well, I think the glue there is science. The science of understanding how old that rock is on the moon probably doesn't have too much military implication and social destruction or whatever, but so you've got the science of space exploration is kind of I think a really interesting thing. And certainly, like today, we just got the new UN climate report out, and there are dire straits here. We're going to have to, if you're a climate denier or a believer, pick one, but I'm a believer. There's stuff happening, and we're going to have to come together, and science may be the interstitial part of relationships that we might be able to use. So I see science as really important here. China is going to have a Mars sample return program about the same time as NASA would like to have its own Mars sample return program. China is working with Russia, apparently on a international lunar science station. There seems to be multiple nations headed for the lunar South Pole to set up some kind of base or some kind of operation, mainly because of the water ice potential it could be down there, where you can convert that to oxygen and drinking water and rocket fuel. So we'll see. But you were kind enough to mention my Moonrush book. What I got out of doing that book was, we don't know the moon very well. It's right in our face, literally, and we're still scratching our heads about where it came from, how it got there, what resources are on there. Is the water ice really there in the concentrations we think? My guess is the moon is going to offer a bunch of new mystery once we get new vehicles down. Russia may have their first return to the moon spacecraft, Luna 25. They're shooting for October. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. And they'll be back in the game. And China has got a very aggressive lunar program. I think today one of my friends, Andrew Jones, wrote a story about their plans for a lunar human mission. More details are coming out from China about what they're trying to do. I don't have any doubt that they're going to go to the moon with humans. They're a very capable country, and you get into the I'm rambling here, but the political dynamics of the capital, U.S. Capitol, if these folks don't realize what's going on internationally with space exploration from a competitive mode, we're going to be left in the launch pad dust, because these guys are going. China and Russia will be more aggressive.
Leonard, space is a very dangerous environment, and we humans are fragile, small things trying to leave the nest with what in time might be considered very primitive vehicles. Doesn't this reality of space exploration make it fundamental to all parties involved that cooperation rather than competition should be the key driver to successful space-based activities?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the key. I think, and there are people at NASA I know that want the competition to drive NASA, because if we get too over here, kind of laissez-faire, like we own the universe or something, we're going to be left again at the launch pad. So there are some people that kind of ballyhoo China's accomplishments, and somewhat deservedly. I mean, they're doing stuff. And on the other hand, we've got Perseverance on Mars, the rover now, and had a first drilling exercise. Didn't come up with the goods yet, but it's moving along. The helicopter's incredible. A Curiosity that people have forgotten. That's another rover NASA put on Mars. That's going fine. It's up there in Gale Crater, moving up the crater, or going up the mountain. And InSight, another probe on Mars, doing better reconnaissance of the inner aspects of how Mars works. So Mars is on the table. So the question you asked there is a good one, though. It's the competition cooperation. It's tough. I think I just see, after all these decades of reporting, that the cooperation we're better off in the long run. The competition, the space race, I grew up with the space race. Ooh, theirs is 184 pounds. Sputnik 1. I remember that. Ours only weighed 30 pounds. And so they must be ahead. That's all as a kid, you were gauging these things early on. And now look at us. My God, everybody's got CubeSats going off, and SpaceX has got starships, and they're putting Starlink up there, and all these things are going on. It's pretty amazing. Now, I will say that one of the issues that I really worry about is the orbital debris problem. Yeah. I mean, you talk about cooperation. We better get this together, we're in trouble. We're already in trouble. I expect some disasters coming. It's going to be head-on collisions, and there's too much stuff going up at once now, and it's cluttered, and you're going to have, it's one thing to lose some Iridium satellite or some, ComSat thing, but if you have some pile driving event going through the space station, and you have loss of life,
Yep.
Then we're in another world. And same with China. I mean, they've got a rescue vehicle on the pad now if there's something that happens to those guys. They're taikonauts. They're ready to go with the next vehicle to go rescue them. So we need some kind of rescue vehicles. But anyway, it's evolving, but I'm really skirting your initial question about cooperation competition. It's multifaceted. And in some ways, we need the competition to keep the fire burning on our, technology innovation. But vice versa, China's got a lot of new ideas. I mean, you got the private sector with particularly Elon Musk. He's driven some really creative solutions here on reusable boosters, and it's it's a great 21st century, and I just hope I see enough of it.
Well, look, Leonard, I mean, just going back to the whole competition and cooperation thing, competition brings with it an acceleration in technical innovation and solutions to wicked problems, because you have to get on top of something before the other guy does, right?
Yeah.
But over time, isn't it true? I mean, and we can use the Cold War as a template here. The competition between the United States and the Soviet Union eventually led to some form of cooperation when it suited both parties to come together. Could we also not see this similar kind of dynamic happen under current conditions between the United States and China?
Yeah, I do. I think it'll happen. I think it'll happen. It may happen because of a space rescue. It may happen because of something went wrong somewhere. It could. I just see us. The more we talk together, I mean, it's a corny line, but the spacefaring nations. Okay, we got the spacefaring nations. Okay, well, there's a lot of spacefaring nations now, and we're going to have to come up with some standard operating procedures, much like in aviation. I mean, I think some of this is really mirroring aviation and how we created international coalitions, and a loss of a plane, everybody chips in, we try to figure it out. So I think I don't see a lot of magic needed here. It just seems like we're going to have political chits we're all going to play, and everybody's got a dynamic, and China's got its dynamic against the US and the US. But I've been here before. It just sounds to me like the Russian card early, and how we dealt with the space race. And I'm a kid that saw Sputnik. I lived in Texas. At least I saw the booster that put up Sputnik. And we were, as a kid, 1957 in October. I mean, the headlines were screaming, "Does it have a bomb in it?" We didn't know. What was it? We saw a light go overhead. And, growing up, then I moved to San Diego, and I'm one of these backyard astronomers. And I'm out there a lot. And I saw Echo balloon go by. I saw Russian Vostok vehicles. And, it's just an amazing time in that early pioneering phase of what we call the space race. And again, it was so corny when you think about it today. America in space, we just launched Alan Shepard for 15 minutes. Yeah. He went up there for 15 minutes and he came back down alive. And there it was. America saluted, and we were excited. And, now we got Bezos shooting off passengers, going up to, it's just, wow, it's great stuff. I couldn't have written this.
Look, Leonard, it raises another very interesting question. I mean, we've been skirting around the topic for a little bit now, but in terms of private enterprises' contribution to the American space element, if you will, what do you think will be the main driver? I mean, for most of us, and I mean, I consider myself old enough to remember, well, very vaguely remember at least one of the Apollo space flights. I think I was about 3 years old, and everyone was going crazy around the TV. And it was like, well, okay, so we were brought up with the idea that NASA was leading the charge. It was a government agency that was leading the charge and creating the American innovation necessary to get man on the moon and so on and so forth. We still have that kind of funk in our head that, the real breakthrough is going to be some sort of secret government scientist coven buried in a basement somewhere. But in actual fact, that may not be the case. It may very well be that the Bezoses of the world, the Bransons of the world, the Musks of the world, in their commercial competition amongst themselves, will come up with the groundbreaking new innovation that then government will have to buy from them to allow them to continue on.
Well, that's sort of what the model is. I think, to NASA's credit, I mean, they have these private-public partnerships. I mean, they see what's going on with Musk, Bezos, Rocket Lab in New Zealand. I mean, you got a lot of different groups. I mean, since we started talking, there's probably been 5 rocket companies started. People want to launch satellites and CubeSats and have their own capability. So I see this as a real interesting time. How NASA handles it, I don't know. There are things like we just saw the Boeing Starliner get delayed. It's a private sector Boeing thing. They fouled up in the first flight of that thing. And so, we're not out of the woods on how this is going to work out. And my biggest fear is that we're going to have loss of life somewhere. And I've seen it, frankly, on the shuttle program. Of all the things I've reported on, it was the saddest time of my career as reporting on Columbia and Challenger. It's just awful, when you have loss of life and the malfeasance, and you got some kind of system that just didn't work right. And we may come up with that on the commercial side, even though we're trying to bond these people together and everybody's. I think, not to dwell on this, but I just sent Jim Oberg a note, a really good writer and historian. This whole Russian module that was docked to the space station and threw it into a tizzy, that shouldn't have happened. That's a little worrisome. And the fact that NASA didn't catch the Russians on the software glitch, are we working together? Because I've seen this on the shuttle. You get complacent. Yep. Everything this is, the shuttle's standard operating procedure, and boom, Challenger happens. Yeah. You get back, and then boom, Columbia happens. There's a organizational issue here where and this is not just NASA, but this is the contractors as well. I think the saddest moment in my life was walking into a room with all the Columbia hardware. When you see what happens when a spacecraft with people in it re-enters and dissipates and kills everybody, a twisted saga of metal, wheels, heat. That was the worst thing I've ever seen.
Look, finally, Leonard, do you think China is disadvantaged by not having their own clique of space entrepreneurs?
Well, they seem to be talking about it, or I'm not quite up on everything that China is claiming as commercial vendors over there, but there are groups that seem to be moving in that direction. And I don't know, I'm not good enough, frankly, to give you a good answer on that one, but I know that there are a number of commercial groups. One group just failed. I mean, what they call China's one of the commercial rocket launchers. They didn't get into orbit. So there are some younger, and I will tell you, when I look at some of these folks in the China space program, there is a lot of younger people. Maybe it's me getting older, but they look awfully young. And they've got a cadre of people that are dedicated to this. And frankly, they got the time, the money, and the human power to solve things. And but to answer your question, I'm not good on that one. All I know is that China brags about their commercial incentive programs and got some kind of companies going. And I'm just not up on everything that they're doing, but I know they had a failure just a few days ago from one of the smaller commercial groups. So they're trying something. But again, boy, you look at the teams on those, even the commercial groups, pretty young, great stuff, and failure can be an option to do better.
Yeah, for sure. Leonard, thank you again for your time and for your insights on the focus.
Thanks for having me. It was great talking to you.
That's it for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed the show. My thanks to our guest Leonard David and to producers Neil Smart and Malcolm Hughes. Thanks also to the Ozcast Network. You can find The Focus on the Sage International website at sageinternational.com.au, the Ozcast Network, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Until next time, goodbye.
Earth Justice is a national legal nonprofit fighting to protect people's health, to preserve magnificent places and wildlife, and to combat climate change. Visit us at earthjustice.org. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.